Breaking news from around your world on this Friday, April 12th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. A top Red Cross official said Friday he's more concerned than I have ever been about the possible regional spread of the Ebola virus in Congo after a new spike in cases. Congo's health ministry on Thursday reported 1,206 confirmed and probable cases, including 764 deaths. The Ebola outbreak in Congo, announced on August 1st, has become the second deadliest in history, behind the West African one from 2014 through 16 that killed more than 11,300 people. The Red Cross cited Congolese health ministry statistics on Thursday, showing 40 new cases over 2 days this week. It called that rate unprecedented in this outbreak. Ebola cases have spiked in recent weeks, and officials are increasingly losing track of where the virus is spreading. Many new Ebola cases aren't linked to previously identified patients, and numerous people are dying in the community rather than in health centers where they might be isolated to prevent further infection. The Red Cross cited lack of trust about Ebola treatment in the community, which has never faced an Ebola outbreak before, and insecurity caused by rebel groups that's hurt aid efforts. The WHO was criticized for not declaring the 2014 Ebola outbreak an international emergency until nearly 1,000 people had died and the disease had spilled across borders. Former Obama White House counsel Greg Craig was indicted Thursday on charges of making false statements and concealing information in a federal foreign lobbying investigation that intersected with the Russia probe. The 74-year-old Craig was charged in a 2-count indictment that accused him of willfully concealing material facts from the Justice Department about work he performed for the Ukrainian government. The indictment, announced by the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, came a day after Craig's lawyer said he expected to be charged in the probe spun off from special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. In a video statement, Craig said the prosecution against him was unprecedented and unjustified, and that he's confident a judge and jury would agree. Craig's indictment is part of a Justice Department crackdown on unregistered foreign lobbying and consulting. The scrutiny of Craig stems from an investigation of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his work on behalf of a pro-Russia political party in Ukraine. The charges come about 3 months after Craig's former law firm agreed to pay more than $4.6 million and publicly acknowledged that it failed to register with the government for its work for the Ukraine. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo began a 3-day visit to Chile, Paraguay, and Peru on Friday, a clutch of fast-growing countries in a region where China's growing presence is a concern for Washington, and Venezuela's crisis has escalated. It will be the first time since 1965 that a U.S. Secretary of State has visited Paraguay, a symbolic gesture that experts say underscores U.S. commitment to the region. Pompeo will also travel on Sunday to Cucuta, a Colombian border city, receiving many of the millions of Venezuelan migrants fleeing hunger and violence in their homeland. Venezuela's political crisis is expected to dominate the trip as the United States pressures President Nicolas Maduro to step down and urges more countries to join the coalition supporting opposition leader Juan Guaido. The visit comes as Washington considers more sanctions against Maduro's government and pushes Russia to remove its troops from Venezuela. Vice President Mike Pence, in an address to the UN Security Council Wednesday, encouraged more countries to join the coalition in support of Guaido. While most Western nations have recognized Guaido as head of state, Russia, China, and Cuba have stood by Maduro. During his travels, Pompeo is expected to highlight the gains from economic and trade cooperation with America, whose regional influence has been increasingly challenged by China. President Donald Trump on Thursday expressed a willingness to hold a third summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, but said in talks with South Korean President Moon Jae-in that Washington would leave sanctions in place on Pyongyang. Trump and Moon in the Oval Office discussed the possibility of Moon having an inter-Korean summit with Kim soon as a way to boost dialogue between the United States and North Korea on denuclearization. North Korea, which has suspended nuclear tests and missile launches, has been pressing for sanctions relief, but has not taken meaningful steps toward dismantling its nuclear weapons program. Trump and Kim have met twice, in Hanoi in February and Singapore last June, building goodwill but failing to agree on a deal to lift sanctions in exchange for North Korea abandoning its nuclear and missile programs. Trump said, "A third summit could happen, and it's step by step. It's not a fast process. I've never said it would be. It's step by step." Asked by reporters whether he was prepared to ease some sanctions on North Korea, Trump said he and Moon were discussing certain humanitarian things and the possibility of South Korea helping the North with food. He did not rule out participating in a three-way summit with both Kim and Moon. A South Korean official said nothing has been decided about the timing and location of a next inter-Korean summit. Boeing says crews have made 96 flights to test a software update for its troubled 737 MAX jet and will make more in coming weeks as the company attempts to convince regulators to let the plane fly again. Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg also said Thursday that the company has met with pilots and airline officials in the U.S. and abroad, holding flight simulator sessions to demonstrate the software changes. The Federal Aviation Administration, which will consider whether the plane can resume flying in the U.S., plans to meet Friday with safety officials and pilots from American, Southwest, and United, the three U.S. carriers that were using the MAX jet. An FAA spokesman said the agency wants to hear from the airlines and pilots before deciding what Boeing must do before the plane is allowed to fly. Regulators around the world grounded the MAX last month after deadly crashes involving the plane in Indonesia and Ethiopia. In both cases, faulty information from a sensor caused anti-stall automation to kick in when it wasn't needed and pushed the plane's nose down. Pilots struggled to counter the plane's actions but were unable to avoid crashing. Regulators in Europe and China are conducting their own reviews of the plane, and company insiders and analysts expect foreign regulators to take longer than the FAA to approve the MAX's return to service. SpaceX launched its second supersized rocket and for the first time landed all three boosters Thursday, a year after sending up a sports car on the initial test flight. The new and improved Falcon Heavy launched a communications satellite called Arabsat, the rocket's first paying customer. The Falcon Heavy is the most powerful rocket in use today, with 27 engines firing at liftoff, 9 per booster. The Falcon Heavy soared from NASA's Kennedy Space Center using the same pad that launched Apollo astronauts to the moon a half-century ago and later space shuttle crews. Because this was an upgraded version of the rocket with unproven changes, SpaceX chief Elon Musk cautioned in advance that things might go wrong. But everything went exceedingly well, and the satellite ended up in the proper orbit. SpaceX employees at company headquarters in Southern California cheered every launch milestone and especially the 3 touchdowns. Musk put his own Tesla convertible on last year's demo. The red roadster, with a mannequin dubbed Starman, likely still at the wheel, remains in a solar orbit stretching just past Mars. The Roadster is thought to be on the other side of the sun from us right now, about 3/4 of the way around its first solar orbit, according to a senior analyst at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. It will take decades, if not centuries, for solar radiation to cause the vehicle to decompose. Israeli spacecraft Bereshit crashed onto the moon Thursday after a series of technical failures during its final descent, shattering hopes of a historic controlled landing on the lunar surface. The support team said the unmanned robotic lander suffered periodic engine and communication failures during the landing sequence, which lasted around 21 minutes. Bereshit, whose name is Hebrew for the biblical phrase in the beginning, had traveled through space for 7 weeks in a series of expanding orbits around Earth before crossing into the moon's gravity last week. So far, only 3 nations have succeeded in carrying out a soft or controlled landing on the lunar surface: the United States, the Soviet Union, and China. Bereshit would have been the first craft to land on the moon that was not the product of a government program. It was built by state-owned IAI and Israeli nonprofit space venture SpaceIL, with $100 million funded almost entirely by private donors. Still, the spacecraft achieved some milestones. It was the smallest and the cheapest spacecraft ever to get to the moon. It blasted off from Florida's Cape Canaveral February 21st on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and entered Earth's orbit about 34 minutes after launch. Its circuitous flight path was around 4 million miles. A direct route from Earth to the moon covers roughly 240,000 miles. Tibetan spiritual leader the Dalai Lama was discharged from a Delhi hospital Friday after being treated for a chest infection. His press secretary said the 83-year-old Nobel Peace Laureate, who was brought to the capital from his base in a northern India hill station for treatment, had recovered from the infection. The Dalai Lama fled to India in early 1959 after a failed uprising against Chinese rule, and he lives in exile in Dharamsala. Disney announced that it would launch its Disney Plus video streaming service November 12th. The service will give subscribers access to Disney's vast film and TV library, as well as new shows. In its first year, the service will run 10 original films and 25 original series, including 3 Avengers spin-offs. Subscriptions will cost $6.99 monthly or $69.99 a year. CEO Bob Iger said, "We are starting from a position of strength and optimism." The subscription cost came in within the range analysts had predicted, at roughly half the price of Netflix's standard HD plan. Disney expects to sign up 60 to 90 million subscribers by 2024. And that's your update for this Friday, April 12th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Thanks so much for supporting this podcast and for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.